My wife yelled, "I don't need to justify myself to you," when I asked where she'd been at 5 a.m. That moment shattered 7 years of what I thought was a solid marriage. Looking back, I should have trusted my instincts sooner, but sometimes the truth reveals itself in ways you can't ignore. I'm Wade, 33, and I work as a cybersecurity specialist monitoring digital threats for Fortune 500 companies from our Tampa Bay waterfront condo. The remote work gives me flexibility to set my own schedule, but it also meant I was home more often than Brooke, who managed corporate events for luxury hotels across Florida and increasingly throughout the Southeast region. We met at a charity gala 7 years ago, where she was coordinating logistics and I was providing tech security for the donor database and payment systems that processed six-figure donations throughout the evening. That evening, we bonded over shared frustrations with difficult clients who changed requirements at the last minute and expected miracles on impossible deadlines, swapping war stories about bridezillas and executives who thought technology worked like magic. She impressed me with her ability to juggle 3 different vendor crises while maintaining her professional composure, somehow managing to solve a catering disaster, coordinate security protocols with my team, and calm a panicked board member all within the span of 30 minutes without breaking a sweat. I found myself looking forward to our coffee meetings during the planning phase just to watch her organize chaos into elegant solutions, turning potential disasters into seamless experiences that made her clients look brilliant and kept donors happy and engaged. Our relationship followed what seemed like a natural progression built on mutual respect, shared ambitions, and genuine compatibility that made everything feel effortless and right from the very beginning. We moved to a high-rise overlooking Tampa Bay after 2 years of dating, splitting the rent down the middle because she insisted on maintaining her financial independence even though my cybersecurity salary could have easily covered everything and then some. The waterfront view from our 20th floor balcony became our evening ritual, where we decompress from work while watching boats navigate the channel and planning weekend trips to explore Florida's hidden gems from the Everglades to historic St. Augustine and everything in between. I proposed during a long weekend in Savannah, presenting the ring at sunset on a historic square where Spanish moss filtered the golden light, and she cried genuine tears of joy that made me absolutely certain I'd found my life partner and best friend for whatever challenges lay ahead. Her parents insisted on funding our Key West destination wedding, creating a celebration that felt more like their vision of social perfection than our preference for something intimate and meaningful, but Brooke seemed genuinely happy with the elaborate ceremony and reception that showcased their connections throughout Florida's hospitality industry and beyond. The early years of our marriage felt stable and predictable in the best possible way, with both of us focused on advancing our careers while building a solid foundation for the family we talked about starting once we hit our professional stride and saved enough for a house with a proper home office and maybe even a workshop. My cybersecurity work involved irregular hours responding to threats across different time zones, analyzing attack patterns and implementing protective measures that kept me mentally engaged even during quiet periods when I was working from our home office overlooking the bay. Brooke's event management role required even more unpredictable scheduling with site visits, vendor meetings, and crisis management that kept her away from home with increasing frequency as her reputation grew and clients demanded her personal attention for their most important corporate retreats and executive conferences. I admired her dedication to creating flawless experiences for these high-profile clients, even when it meant canceled dinner plans or solo weekends while she handled last-minute emergencies at resort properties from Orlando to Miami, always returning home with stories of challenges overcome and professional relationships strengthened through her problem-solving skills. She had this remarkable ability to transform stress into focused energy, tackling problems with systematic precision and creative solutions that reminded me why I'd fallen for her competence and grace under pressure during that first charity gala where we met and immediately clicked over our shared understanding of what it meant to deliver excellence under impossible circumstances. During those first 5 years of marriage, I genuinely believed we were building something lasting and meaningful together, combining her event management expertise with my cybersecurity background to create a partnership that could handle whatever life threw at us. We talked about buying a house with enough space for home offices and maybe starting a family once we both felt established in our careers, sharing dreams that felt realistic and achievable based on our combined income and professional trajectory. Looking back now, I realize I was so focused on our shared goals and future plans that I missed the subtle changes in Brooke's behavior that started during our 6th year together, changes that would eventually reveal themselves as something far more destructive than career stress or the normal evolution of a long-term relationship. Those warning signs were there, but I was too trusting and too invested in what I thought we were building together to recognize them for what they really were until it was far too late to save anything worth preserving. I had no idea that everything I believed about our marriage was about to unravel in ways I never could have imagined. The changes started subtly during our 6th year together, beginning with what seemed like legitimate career advancement opportunities that gradually morphed into something far more suspicious and concerning. Brooke suddenly began working unusual hours that didn't align with any corporate event schedules I could verify, claiming she needed to conduct venue inspections late at night when the properties were quiet and she could properly assess acoustics and lighting without interference from daytime operations. These mysterious late-night site visits became a weekly occurrence, sometimes extending past midnight, with Brooke explaining that she was building relationships with night managers and security staff who could provide insider insights about potential problems during actual events. She started receiving encrypted messages on a second phone she claimed was a work emergency line specifically for high-profile clients who demanded absolute privacy and couldn't risk having their corporate retreat plans leaked to competitors or industry publications. The device never left her side, and she would step onto our balcony to take calls, speaking in hushed tones that sounded far more intimate than any professional conversation I'd ever overheard during our years together. When I mentioned that her tone seemed unusually personal for business calls, she became defensive and irritated, explaining that wealthy clients expected a certain level of personal attention and emotional investment that required her to sound genuinely caring rather than coldly professional. Her wardrobe underwent a dramatic transformation during this period, with expensive designer pieces appearing in our closet that never seemed to make appearances during our date nights or social events together. She would leave for work wearing sophisticated business attire that I'd never seen before, claiming these particular outfits were required for meetings with luxury hotel executives who expected their event coordinators to project the same level of refinement as their target clientele. When I asked why she never wore these stunning new clothes when we went out together, she brushed off the question by saying she preferred to keep her work persona separate from our personal relationship and didn't want to feel like she was performing during our intimate time together. I discovered charges on our shared credit card for upscale restaurants in downtown St. Petersburg that we'd never visited together, expensive establishments with price points that seemed excessive even for legitimate business entertainment. Brooke explained these as necessary client meetings where she needed to experience the quality of service and ambience firsthand in order to make informed recommendations for corporate events, claiming that her reputation depended on personal knowledge of every high-end venue in the region. She also pointed out hotel charges for site visits at properties that didn't match any events listed on her public work calendar, expensive overnight stays at luxury resorts that she claimed were essential for understanding the complete client experience from check-in to check-out. Her emotional patterns became increasingly erratic and unpredictable, oscillating wildly between periods of guilt-driven affection where she would shower me with unexpected gifts and elaborate apologies for being absent, followed by defensive hostility whenever I asked simple questions about her day or expressed any curiosity about her expanding client base. The expensive gifts seemed designed to distract me from asking too many questions, expensive items like premium electronics and clothing that felt more like guilt offerings than genuine expressions of love. During her hostile phases, she would accuse me of being controlling and suspicious, claiming that my questions about her work schedule demonstrated a lack of trust and respect for her professional autonomy that made her question whether our marriage could survive my apparent need to micromanage her career. She began attending exclusive fitness classes at an expensive private club that required member referrals and charged astronomical monthly fees, claiming that networking with wealthy women was essential for building her client base in the luxury event industry. When I suggested we could work out together at our building's perfectly adequate gym, she dismissed the idea by explaining that her new fitness routine was specifically designed to put her in social proximity with potential clients who valued exclusivity and wouldn't be caught dead in a standard apartment building fitness center. These classes seemed to consume enormous amounts of her weekend time, often extending into long lunches and spa treatments that she claimed were necessary for maintaining the polished appearance that her high-end clients expected from their event coordinator. The most disturbing pattern involved her complete emotional disconnect from our relationship during this period, treating me more like a roommate who happened to share her living expenses than the husband she'd married just a few years earlier. Our conversations became superficial and transactional, focused entirely on logistics and schedules rather than the deeper emotional connection that had originally brought us together. She stopped asking about my cybersecurity projects, showing no interest in the complex threats I was analyzing or the satisfaction I derived from protecting corporate networks from sophisticated attacks. When I tried to share exciting developments in my career, like successfully preventing a major data breach or receiving recognition from grateful clients, she would respond with distracted nods while scrolling through her phone, clearly more invested in whatever messages she was receiving than anything happening in my professional life. Our physical intimacy suffered dramatically during this period, with Brooke claiming exhaustion from her demanding work schedule or stress about upcoming events that required her complete mental focus. She started staying up late in our living room, supposedly reviewing vendor contracts and venue layouts, but I noticed she was actually spending hours on social media platforms that seemed unrelated to her professional responsibilities. The timing of her alleged work emergencies became increasingly convenient, occurring precisely when I suggested romantic evenings or weekend getaways that might have required her undivided attention and emotional presence. The breaking point came on a humid Tuesday morning in August when I woke at 4:30 to the oppressive Florida heat that our air conditioning couldn't quite overcome, reaching across the bed only to find Brooke's side completely cold and empty. I lay there for a moment, listening to the silence of our 20th floor condo, wondering if she'd gotten up early for another of her mysterious work emergencies, but something felt different this time, more final and deliberate than her usual careful departures. I walked to our floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Tampa Bay, watching early morning joggers on the waterfront trail below, and noticed that her designated parking space in our building's garage was completely empty, her white BMW nowhere to be seen. The digital clock on our nightstand glowed 4:47 in the humid darkness, far too early for any legitimate business meeting or venue inspection, even by Brooke's increasingly flexible standards of what constituted professional responsibility. I made coffee and sat on our balcony, watching the sun slowly rise over the bay while trying to rationalize yet another unexplained absence, but my cybersecurity training had taught me to recognize patterns that didn't add up to legitimate explanations. At 5:15, I heard her key in the lock, followed by the careful sounds of someone trying to move quietly through our entryway, and I remained sitting at our small balcony table, waiting to see what explanation she would offer this time. When she appeared in the doorway leading to the balcony, I was struck by how disheveled she looked despite her obvious attempts to put herself together before coming upstairs, her hair slightly mussed and her expensive business dress wrinkled in a way that suggested it had been removed and hastily put back on. The scent that hit me as she approached was unfamiliar and expensive, a masculine cologne mixed with her usual perfume in a combination that made my stomach tighten with the realization that my worst suspicions were probably correct. She moved with the guilty energy of someone who knew they'd been caught but was still hoping to brazen their way through the confrontation, and when I asked where she'd been at this impossible hour, her response revealed everything I needed to know about the state of our marriage. She claimed she'd been helping a colleague with a family emergency, but when I asked for basic details about who needed help and what kind of emergency required her presence at 5 in the morning, she became instantly combative and defensive rather than providing the simple clarification that an innocent person would have offered without hesitation. Her explosive declaration that she didn't need to justify herself to me wasn't just a refusal to answer my question, but a complete rejection of the transparency and mutual respect that should form the foundation of any healthy marriage. The hostile edge in her voice made it clear that she viewed my reasonable request for explanation as an unacceptable intrusion into what she considered her private affairs, as if 7 years of marriage hadn't earned me the right to know why my wife was coming home at dawn smelling like another man. I realized in that moment that this wasn't the first time she'd been absent without explanation, but simply the first time she'd been careless enough to get caught, and her aggressive deflection confirmed that she had no intention of offering honesty or accountability for her actions. The conversation deteriorated rapidly from there, with Brooke becoming increasingly hostile and accusatory, claiming that my questions demonstrated an unhealthy level of suspicion and control that made her feel like a prisoner in her own marriage. She accused me of being paranoid and insecure, suggesting that my cybersecurity work had made me overly suspicious of normal human behavior, and that a secure husband wouldn't need constant reassurance about his wife's professional obligations and social commitments. When I pointed out that coming home at 5 in the morning wearing unfamiliar cologne wasn't normal behavior for a married woman, she became even more defensive, insisting that I was imagining things and that my accusations were both hurtful and completely unfounded. Her gaslighting attempts were so transparent that I almost felt insulted by her assumption that I would accept such obvious lies, but I also recognized that this level of deception required significant practice and planning on her part. The entire confrontation ended with her storming into our ensuite bathroom for an unusually long shower while I sat alone in our living room, watching the sunrise paint Tampa Bay in shades of gold and orange, processing the devastating realization that my marriage was effectively over. The woman who emerged from that bathroom 40 minutes later was a stranger wearing my wife's face, someone who had made it abundantly clear that she felt no obligation to explain her actions or consider my feelings when making choices that affected our relationship. As I sat there listening to the early morning sounds of the city waking up below our balcony, I understood with perfect clarity that everything I'd believed about our partnership had been an illusion, and that the person I'd planned to spend my life with had already moved on without bothering to inform me that our marriage was nothing more than a convenient cover story for whatever she was actually doing with her time and attention. That Tuesday morning marked the exact moment when I stopped trying to save our relationship and started planning my exit strategy, because no amount of love or commitment could bridge the gap between someone who valued honesty and someone who viewed deception as a basic life skill. The clarity that came with accepting the death of my marriage was almost liberating, like finally acknowledging a painful truth I'd been avoiding for months while hoping things would magically return to normal. While Brooke showered and prepared for another day of lies and deception, I methodically executed an escape plan that crystallized in my mind with the systematic precision I usually applied to cybersecurity protocols. I moved through our condo like someone conducting a digital forensics investigation, systematically gathering evidence of my life while leaving no trace of my intentions or future plans. I pulled waterproof duffel bags from our storage closet and began packing my essential belongings with the calculated efficiency of someone who'd spent years analyzing risk mitigation strategies for corporate clients facing catastrophic security breaches. My laptop, external drives, and critical work equipment went into the first bag, followed by important documents I'd been storing in our home office filing cabinet, including my birth certificate, passport, college transcripts, and professional certifications that would be impossible to replace quickly. I gathered sentimental items that carried genuine emotional value, like the watch my grandfather had given me for college graduation, photographs from my childhood and family vacations that predated Brooke's presence in my life, and a few books that had shaped my thinking during formative years. The process felt surreal, like dismantling a life I'd thought was permanent, but I approached it with the same methodical thoroughness I'd used to secure a compromised network before shutting it down completely. I accessed our online banking system while Brooke was still in the shower, transferring exactly half of our joint savings to a new account I'd opened at a different bank during my lunch break the previous week, a precautionary measure I'd implemented after noticing the unexplained credit card charges that suggested our financial security might be compromised. The transfer felt like activating a dead man's switch, the final step in protecting my assets from someone who'd proven they couldn't be trusted with basic honesty, let alone shared financial responsibility. I left enough money in our joint account to cover her half of the rent and utilities for the current month, ensuring she wouldn't be able to claim I'd abandoned her without notice or left her financially stranded, even though her secret activities suggested she had alternative resources I knew nothing about. Loading my truck took less than 20 minutes, a sobering reminder of how little I'd accumulated during our 7 years together that truly belonged to me rather than us, and how easy it was to extract my actual life from what had turned out to be an elaborate performance we'd been conducting for an audience of family and friends who believed we were building something lasting. I drove north toward Georgia without leaving a note or forwarding address, recognizing that any explanation I might offer would only provide Brooke with information she could use to locate me or craft a more convincing cover story for our mutual acquaintances. The highway stretched ahead of me like a promise of anonymity, and I found myself feeling something I hadn't experienced in months, a sense of genuine freedom and possibility that made me realize how constrained and anxious I'd become while trying to navigate Brooke's increasingly erratic behavior and emotional manipulation. I found temporary refuge in an extended-stay hotel in Jacksonville, a clean and efficient space that felt more honest than our beautifully decorated condo that had become a stage set for Brooke's deception, and I appreciated the straightforward nature of a business relationship where I paid for services received without any hidden agendas or complicated emotional dynamics. Within a few days, I'd secured a month-to-month apartment in Gainesville, a college town where I could blend in anonymously among the transient population of graduate students and young professionals who valued privacy and minded their own business. The apartment was nothing special, but it was mine, a space where I could work remotely without constantly analyzing every sound in the hallway or wondering whose cologne might be clinging to the furniture when I returned from running errands. I blocked Brooke's number on all my devices and deleted every social media account that might allow her to track my activities or monitor my emotional state, recognizing that maintaining any connection would only enable her to continue the psychological manipulation that had kept me confused and second-guessing my own perceptions for months. I instructed my employer to forward no personal information to anyone claiming to be family, explaining that I was dealing with a domestic situation that required complete privacy, and my supervisor understood immediately, mentioning that cybersecurity professionals often dealt with personal threats related to their work protecting high-value corporate targets. Within 3 weeks, I'd accepted a position with a cybersecurity firm based in Atlanta that offered full remote work, better benefits, and a significant salary increase that would allow me to start fresh financially while building expertise in advanced threat analysis that had always interested me professionally. The new job felt like stepping through a portal into a parallel life where my skills were valued and my contributions mattered, where I could focus on protecting other people's digital assets instead of constantly defending myself against psychological attacks from someone who was supposed to be my partner and ally. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd become an expert at identifying and neutralizing digital threats while completely missing the human threat that had been systematically undermining my personal life for months, but I chose to view this experience as valuable training that would make me better at recognizing deception in all its forms. My colleagues at the new firm welcomed me with professional respect and genuine interest in my expertise, creating a work environment where I felt appreciated and intellectually challenged rather than constantly on guard against manipulation and gaslighting. I threw myself into learning advanced penetration testing techniques and threat modeling frameworks, finding genuine satisfaction in work that felt meaningful and important, protecting organizations from the kind of calculated deception that I now recognized as a fundamental threat to trust and security in any relationship, personal or professional. The contrast between my new professional environment and the toxic dynamic I'd escaped became more apparent with each passing day, as I rediscovered what it felt like to interact with people who valued honesty, competence, and mutual respect rather than viewing every conversation as an opportunity for manipulation or control. For the first time in months, I was sleeping through the night without wondering what lies I'd discover in the morning, and I was waking up energized rather than dreading whatever crisis or confrontation might be waiting for me at home. After establishing myself professionally in my new position, I relocated to Asheville, North Carolina, drawn by the mountain scenery and the city's reputation as a tech-friendly community where I could build a genuine life rather than merely escaping my past. I found a modest house on the outskirts of town with a dedicated home office that overlooked the Blue Ridge Mountains, a view that reminded me daily of the vastness of possibilities beyond the narrow, toxic world I'd left behind in Florida. The house needed work, but I approached the renovation projects with the same systematic methodology I applied to cybersecurity analysis, researching techniques and taking my time to do things properly rather than rushing towards some artificial deadline imposed by someone else's expectations. I discovered an unexpected passion for woodworking while furnishing my new home, finding genuine satisfaction in creating functional pieces with my hands rather than spending all my time in the digital realm protecting other people's data from threats they couldn't see or understand. The local climbing community at nearby crags welcomed newcomers with genuine enthusiasm, and I found myself drawn to the physical and mental challenges of problem-solving on rock faces that required complete focus and honest assessment of my capabilities without any room for self-deception or wishful thinking. I joined a cycling group that explored mountain trails throughout the region, discovering the meditative qualities of long rides through forests where the only sounds were my breathing, the rhythm of my pedals, and the subtle noises of wildlife going about their lives without drama or deception. These activities connected me with people who shared my appreciation for direct communication, mutual support, and the kind of authentic achievement that comes from pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone rather than manipulating others to provide validation or security. Through a professional conference on digital security held in Charlotte, I met Kimberly, a software architect who designed educational platforms for universities and shared my belief that technology should serve genuine human needs rather than enabling deception or exploitation. Our initial conversations focused on the technical challenges of creating secure systems that protected student data while remaining accessible and user-friendly, but I found myself appreciating her direct communication style and her genuine interest in solving problems rather than creating them. She had this refreshing habit of saying exactly what she meant without hidden agendas or emotional manipulation, treating disagreements as opportunities for collaborative problem-solving rather than power struggles or personal attacks. Our relationship developed slowly and transparently over 18 months, marked by honest discussions about our previous marriages and shared goals for building something authentic together rather than rushing into commitment based on chemistry or convenience. She understood my need for emotional honesty and didn't interpret my questions about her activities as controlling behavior, recognizing that trust required transparency and that healthy relationships were built on mutual respect rather than blind faith or willful ignorance. We spent weekends exploring the mountain region together, hiking trails that challenged us physically while providing opportunities for conversations that deepened our understanding of each other's values and long-term goals. She appreciated my methodical approach to planning activities and my attention to details that made our adventures more enjoyable, while I valued her creative problem-solving skills and her ability to find humor in unexpected situations without dismissing legitimate concerns or minimizing real challenges. When we decided to marry, the ceremony at the Biltmore Estate Gardens reflected our shared preference for meaningful simplicity over elaborate performance, with only immediate family present to witness our commitment rather than staging an event designed to impress acquaintances or satisfy other people's expectations about what weddings should look like. The contrast between this celebration and my previous wedding couldn't have been more stark, representing the difference between two people choosing to build a life together versus someone using a relationship as a stepping stone to social status or financial security. Within our first year of marriage, Kimberly became pregnant with our daughter Lily, creating the stable family dynamic I'd always envisioned but had never experienced with someone who genuinely wanted to share the responsibilities and joys of raising children together. Watching Kimberly prepare for motherhood with the same thoughtful attention she brought to her professional work filled me with confidence that we were creating something lasting and meaningful, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than romantic illusions or emotional manipulation. The pregnancy proceeded smoothly, marked by honest discussions about our hopes and concerns for our child's future, practical planning for the adjustments we'd need to make in our work schedules and living arrangements, and genuine excitement about the family we were building together through conscious choice rather than accident or social pressure. When Lily was born, I experienced a profound sense of completion and purpose that made my previous life seem like a rehearsal for something I hadn't known I was missing. The deep satisfaction that comes from protecting and nurturing someone who depends on you completely while being supported by a partner who shares your commitment to creating a safe and loving environment for the next generation. The early months of parenthood brought the usual challenges of sleep deprivation and lifestyle adjustments, but Kimberly and I approached these obstacles as a team, supporting each other through difficult moments without keeping score or using stress as an excuse for emotional manipulation or blame. I found myself marveling at how different this experience was from anything I'd known with Brooke, who had always viewed challenges as opportunities to demonstrate her victim status rather than occasions for problem-solving and mutual support. Our daughter's presence in our lives created a sense of shared purpose that strengthened our relationship rather than straining it, as we both discovered depths of love and protectiveness that enhanced our appreciation for each other and our commitment to building a family culture based on honesty, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The cybersecurity consulting firm I'd been considering finally became a reality as I leveraged my experience and professional network to create a practice that allowed me to work with clients who valued expertise and integrity rather than just seeking the lowest bid or the most convenient solution. Working from my home office with its mountain views, I found myself more productive and satisfied than I'd ever been during my corporate years, building a reputation for thorough analysis and practical recommendations that helped organizations protect their data and operations from increasingly sophisticated threats. The irony of building a successful practice focused on identifying and neutralizing deception while recovering from a relationship built on lies wasn't lost on me, but I chose to view my personal experience as valuable training that made me more effective at recognizing the human elements of security vulnerabilities that purely technical approaches often missed. 4 years after my disappearance from Florida, Brooke somehow managed to track me down to my Asheville office through what must have been a private investigator, appearing unannounced during my lunch break and shocking me with her dramatically altered appearance that spoke volumes about the trajectory her life had taken since our marriage ended. She looked gaunt and hollow-eyed, her designer clothes unable to conceal the obvious weight loss and the nervous energy that radiated from her like someone who'd been living under constant stress for an extended period. The confident, polished woman I'd once known had been replaced by someone who seemed diminished and desperate, fidgeting with her purse strap and checking her phone obsessively as if expecting rescue from an uncomfortable situation. When she saw me emerging from the small cafe where I'd been grabbing lunch before my next client meeting, her face went through a complex series of expressions: relief, panic, hope, and something that looked like genuine shame competing for dominance as she realized the moment she'd apparently been building toward for months or years. Her confession came tumbling out in a rush of words that seemed rehearsed yet desperate, as if she'd practiced this conversation countless times but was still unsure of her ability to deliver it convincingly. She admitted to a year-long affair with Marcus, a wealthy hotel owner whose corporate events she'd managed, explaining that the 5 a.m. absence I'd caught her in was indeed a return from his penthouse suite where they'd been planning to leave their respective spouses and build a life together based on what she claimed was genuine love rather than convenience or financial security. Her voice cracked as she described how Marcus had abandoned her the moment his wife discovered their affair and initiated divorce proceedings that ultimately cost him 2 hotels and custody of his children, leaving Brooke professionally blacklisted throughout the Tampa event management industry when word spread about her role in destroying his marriage and business reputation. The tearful apology that followed felt both genuine and calculated, as if she'd finally grasped the magnitude of what she'd thrown away but was still primarily motivated by her current desperate circumstances rather than authentic remorse for the pain she'd caused me during our marriage. I listened to her confession with complete emotional detachment, feeling nothing but mild curiosity about someone who seemed like a stranger from another lifetime, someone whose problems and regrets had no bearing on the life I'd built with Kimberly and Lily in our mountain home. Her explanations about Marcus manipulating her emotions and taking advantage of her insecurities might have been partially true, but they couldn't change the fundamental fact that she'd made conscious choices to deceive me for months and had shown no remorse until the consequences of those choices destroyed her alternative plans. The woman standing before me seemed to have no genuine understanding of why her betrayal had been so devastating, focusing entirely on her current difficulties rather than acknowledging the systematic psychological manipulation and gaslighting she'd subjected me to while conducting her secret relationship. As she continued talking about her attempts to rebuild her career in different cities and her series of failed relationships with men who'd ultimately discovered her history of infidelity, I found myself analyzing her behavior with the same detached professional interest I might apply to a cybersecurity threat assessment. Her patterns hadn't changed at all. She was still viewing relationships as transactions designed to provide security and validation rather than partnerships built on mutual respect and genuine emotional connection, and her current desperation stemmed from her inability to find another man willing to subsidize her lifestyle and emotional needs without demanding honesty in return. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Kimberly arrived for our planned lunch date with 3-year-old Lily, who burst through my office door calling out enthusiastically for her daddy and completely transforming the atmosphere in the room with her innocent energy and obvious affection. I watched Brooke's face as she processed the reality of my new life, the mountain views from my office windows, the family photos on my desk, and the unmistakable evidence that I'd not only survived her betrayal but had thrived in ways that probably exceeded anything I might have achieved if she'd never forced me to rebuild my life from scratch. Lily's presence seemed to hit Brooke like a physical blow, as she realized that I'd found exactly what we'd once talked about building together, a stable family with someone who genuinely wanted to share the responsibilities and joys of raising children rather than viewing parenthood as another status symbol or bargaining chip in relationship negotiations. The obvious happiness and contentment radiating from my interaction with my daughter and wife created a stark contrast to the desperation and defeat that seemed to define Brooke's current existence, and I could see her struggling to process the realization that the life she'd thrown away had been everything she'd claimed to want, just not with the person she'd chosen to provide it. Kimberly handled the awkward encounter with the same grace and directness that had first attracted me to her, introducing herself politely to Brooke while clearly assessing the situation and understanding immediately that this unexpected visitor represented some kind of threat or complication from my past that needed to be managed carefully. Lily's innocent questions about who the sad lady was and why she looked so upset provided a moment of levity that highlighted the generational gap between the toxic patterns Brooke represented and the healthy family dynamics Kimberly and I were creating for our daughter. The contrast between Brooke's desperate energy and my family's natural ease with each other seemed to underscore everything that had gone wrong in my first marriage and everything that was going right in my second. And I could see Brooke realizing that she was witnessing not just my personal happiness but evidence of the kind of person I'd become when freed from her constant manipulation and emotional chaos. The encounter ended with Brooke fleeing my office in tears after witnessing the obvious love and stability I'd built with my new family, her composure finally cracking under the weight of confronting the reality that I'd moved beyond her reach and built something genuine with someone who valued the same things I did. Watching her retreat to her car, I felt only relief that this chapter of my past was finally closed without creating any disruption to the peaceful life I'd worked so hard to build. It was over. After Brooke's dramatic exit from my office, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief that the final chapter of our relationship had closed cleanly without creating any drama or unfinished business that might complicate my present life. Kimberly and I took Lily to our favorite mountain cafe for lunch, where we discussed our weekend plans for visiting apple orchards, and Lily chattered excitedly about her preschool friends, representing the peaceful domestic routine that had become the foundation of my happiness and contentment. The normalcy of our conversation and the simple pleasure of watching Lily draw pictures on her placemat while Kimberly and I planned our family activities created a stark contrast to the emotional turbulence that had briefly threatened our afternoon but ultimately left us untouched. Over the following weeks, I learned through mutual acquaintances still connected to the Tampa social scene that Brooke's life had continued its downward spiral after our encounter, with failed attempts at rebuilding her career in Jacksonville, Atlanta, and eventually Orlando, where she'd settled into a mid-level corporate marketing position that provided basic financial security but none of the prestige or luxury she'd once taken for granted. Her series of relationships had followed a predictable pattern of initial attraction followed by disillusionment when potential partners discovered her history of infidelity and emotional manipulation, leaving her increasingly isolated and bitter about her inability to recapture the stability she'd destroyed through her own choices. Marcus had lost his business empire and custody of his children, eventually remarrying a woman half his age who left him within 6 months after discovering his financial problems and reputation for treating relationships as disposable conveniences rather than meaningful partnerships. The various acquaintances who shared these updates seemed to expect some reaction from me, perhaps satisfaction at Brooke's struggles or regret about what might have been, but I felt nothing beyond mild curiosity about people whose decisions had no bearing on my current life or future plans. I made a conscious decision not to share these updates with Kimberly, having learned that the past only matters when it informs better decisions in the present, and I was focused entirely on the family traditions we were building with Lily and the cybersecurity consulting firm I was launching from my home office. My business had grown steadily through word-of-mouth recommendations from satisfied clients who appreciated my thorough approach to threat assessment and my ability to explain complex security concepts in practical terms that helped them make informed decisions about protecting their digital assets. The irony of building a successful career focused on identifying and neutralizing deception while having survived a marriage built on lies continued to provide valuable insights that made me more effective at recognizing the human elements of security vulnerabilities that purely technical approaches often missed. Kimberly's software architecture work had also expanded as universities increasingly recognized the need for robust educational platforms that could protect student data while remaining accessible and user-friendly, creating opportunities for us to collaborate on projects that combined our expertise in complementary ways. Our professional partnership reflected the same mutual respect and honest communication that characterized our personal relationship, with both of us contributing our strengths while supporting each other through challenges without keeping score or using stress as an excuse for emotional manipulation. Lily was thriving in her preschool environment, displaying the same curiosity and problem-solving instincts that Kimberly and I valued in our work, and her innocent questions about the world around her reminded us daily of the importance of creating a family culture based on honesty, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The routine of bedtime stories, weekend adventures in the mountains, and holiday traditions we were establishing felt more meaningful and lasting than anything I'd experienced during my years with Brooke, representing the difference between building something authentic and maintaining an elaborate performance for an audience of people who didn't really know us. My consulting practice had reached the point where I was considering hiring additional staff to handle the increasing demand for cybersecurity expertise, but I was careful to maintain the work-life balance that allowed me to be present for my family while building a business that reflected my values and professional standards. The home office overlooking the Blue Ridge Mountains had become a sanctuary where I could focus on protecting other people's digital lives while living my own life with complete transparency and integrity, a daily reminder of how far I'd traveled from the toxic environment I'd escaped in Florida. When former colleagues or acquaintances from my Tampa years occasionally reached out through professional networks, I responded politely but briefly, maintaining the boundaries that protected my current life from unnecessary complications or reminders of a time when I'd been naive about the importance of emotional honesty in relationships. The family life Kimberly and I had built together felt both completely natural and remarkably precious, a daily demonstration that love could be expressed through practical support, honest communication, and shared commitment to each other's growth and happiness rather than romantic gestures or emotional manipulation. The contrast between my current contentment and the constant anxiety I'd experienced during my final months with Brooke served as a powerful reminder of the importance of choosing partners who valued the same fundamental principles about honesty, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. As Lily grew older and began asking questions about family relationships and how people should treat each other, I found myself drawing on my experience with both marriages to help her understand the difference between love that builds people up and attention that tears them down. The lessons I'd learned about recognizing manipulation and gaslighting had become valuable tools for helping my daughter develop the confidence and critical thinking skills she'd need to build healthy relationships throughout her life.